Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Today on the podcast, my guest is John Brubaker. John is a former college lacrosse coach who is now a leadership author, speaker, and executive coach. In fact, he's my coach. Today, we're going to be talking about his award-winning leadership book called Seeds of Success and the impact that one leader can make in the world. Leaders, this podcast is a reminder of how important our role is in impacting the lives around us. This is a powerful conversation that you don't want to miss. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to episode 14 of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by John Brubaker. John is a professional speaker, executive coach, and an award-winning author of 11 books on leadership performance. Now, you might know him on Twitter as Coach Brew. Yes, he's the guy who likes to Photoshop all my Friday motivational posts. But today I want to talk about a book that he wrote. It's called Seeds of Success. And in my mind, it's one of the best books I've ever read about a mentor-mentee relationship. And I wanted to talk to him about that today. So, John, welcome.
Hey, John, thanks for having me here. It is Thursday, so it's almost Friday. Let's go.
It'll be tomorrow morning.
That's right. Photoshop Friday, baby.
Photoshop Friday. So I introduced you briefly, but tell us a little bit more about yourself. But specifically, you were a college lacrosse player and eventually went on to coach college lacrosse. So how did you go into the coaching profession in the beginning?
I stumbled into it by accident, really. I wasn't a PE major. I wasn't a teacher. Didn't go the education route. I was just coaching lacrosse while I was in grad school, getting my doctorate. First getting my master's at my alma mater. I was a GA and coached my fifth year there. And then while I was getting my doctorate, I was just coaching like a middle school team, just to give back to the game, get outside as opposed to spending all my time in a classroom or a library, and just have fun. It's a sport that I love, that I played since I was in eighth grade, and kind of caught the coaching bug there. I was introduced to a young man at the rec department field who was a college athlete. And he had asked me, we'd met a bunch of times there and just passed the ball around and talked. And he asked me if I'd ever be interested in coaching college lacrosse. And I said, maybe some point, like when I'm retired, or I don't know. It wasn't like a career ambition. He said, well, the assistant coach at my college just stepped down. Our head coach is looking for someone new. You'd be great. I want to introduce you to him. I said, I don't think I'm interested in that. He's like, listen, man, what's it hurt to just have a conversation? And I said, you're probably right. Sure. So I had a conversation. The conversation led to a very unique job interview. And that's sort of where I got hooked on, coaching at the college level. I spent 12 years doing that, assistant coach, worked my way up to head coach, coached Division 1, 2, 3, like each level. And then ultimately in 2004, got fired on my birthday for not winning a national championship. And I think that's kind of a telltale marker of the fact that the business side of sports has infiltrated A, minor sports, and B, the small college level. I was coaching a small Division II school. We were the smallest school in the NCAA at the time. We had 650, 700 students. We had just gone to the NCAA Final Four 2 years earlier. We had top rank recruiting classes, multiple All-Americans, academic All-Americans. I had a Rhodes Scholarship finalist the year before I got fired. So we were doing everything the right way, graduating kids, and just didn't win the big one. And so I thought that was the worst thing that happened to me. It actually turned out to be the best thing to happen for me.
I was going to say, in a way, I'm glad that it happened because you've been writing, you've been, coaching leaders, you've been speaking, and you've been writing books, and of which I've read several. And I'm glad that you've dove in the world of, coaching leaders, because you've been coaching me and reading your books and just, learning what you've learned over the years. I think, it's, in a way, it's great that you've been able to come into this world versus just being in the college coaching world. So I understand you were a radio personality for quite a while too with ESPN.
Yeah, I've got a face for radio, don't I?
Yeah, I was going to say that, but so the book I wanted to talk to you about today, and it deals with lacrosse, is Seeds of Success. And I want to tell you, I have read your other books, which are more entrepreneurial, more, how to differentiate yourself against the competition, which I absolutely love that stuff. But my passion is leadership. And when I read Seeds of Success, this book blew me away, because I think in this book, you really uncover, or you tell a story of a mentor and a mentee that it's very deep, and I really like the way you tell the story. So what motivated you to write this book?
Yeah, it's interesting. Number one, that we've known each other for a while before you finally stumbled into and got around to reading this one.
Yes.
And it turns out to be the one you love the most out of all the others that you read. So that's just really cool for me to hear. It's the one that I most closely identify with, because it's technically like a modern business fable, essentially, about a mentor and a protege, but it is based on my time with my coaching mentor. And sure, I took some creative license with a few things in there, but it's not far off from what really happened with us and the impact that just one leader can have on a person's life. And I look at, I'm deviating from your question, but
that's okay.
The impact of one leader, the magnitude of a mentor can't be underestimated. I look back at the guidance he gave me after I became a head coach, and the career decisions I made. If I hadn't listened to him and taken his advice about certain jobs I took, I wouldn't have been kind of on the path or on the route to take the job I took, where I met my wife. And if I hadn't met my wife, I wouldn't have the kids that I have and the family that my life would have turned out very differently without his guidance.
Well, you even talk about that in the book. You talk about the ripples, right? A pebble goes into a lake, and the ripples and the effects, and your mentor had ripples into a lot of people's lives, and we'll get into that a little bit. But and I think that's I think you're getting right down to where you're saying is that leaders can have a real influence. Coaches, leaders, teachers can have a real influence on not just the direct people that are in around them, but also going out further with families and generations even. So, so you touched on this a little bit, but why did you write this story?
I still haven't answered your question. I'm sorry.
Oh, well, that's okay.
So to answer your question, which I think you're going to repeat before I rudely interrupted you.
Okay.
It was simply there's a side of a leader that their people, their team, their employees get to see, their proteges get to see. And that isn't always the same guy or the same woman that their family, their wife, their husband, or their kids always get to see. And I had no intentions of writing this book until I attended his funeral. And I saw multiple generations, as you just mentioned, of his former players, players that played for him, and then their kids who played for him. So it was definitely multi-generational. They all had the exact same experience, and the exact same experience that I had as his assistant. And the disconnect was his family, his kids, grandkids, in-laws, they didn't know him like we did. And, they asked me to share a few words at the, with the eulogy at the service. And then that turned into just sharing some stories with the family at the reception. And I realized the man that we came to know and love is very different than the person they knew. And my goal was to kind of chronicle and catalog some of those stories for their benefit so they could get to see a different side of their dad, their grandfather. And that's what turned into the book. And it, if it never won a single award, if it never sold, a single copy, and I just gave a dozen copies away to his family, it was mission accomplished. But it turned into much more than that. So that's sort of the genesis of it.
And that's why you chose to write it in a fictional format versus a nonfiction book, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So in the book, you've got this young Jack Burton, right? He's the main character, and he's mentored by a legendary coach. And in the book, the coach is named Morgan Randall. He's this legendary coach that have been starting lacrosse programs all over the country, been doing it for 40 years. And Jack gets to be his assistant coach just by chance, if you will. How closely and you touched on this a little bit, how closely does this story match your own personal story with the real legendary coach, Randy Mills?
I wouldn't say it's 100% match. There's a little bit of creative license, and obviously names were changed. Simply because to be able to track down a lot of these people and get their permission to use their identity would have been just darn near impossible. But the story itself, the foundational leadership experiences, and the lessons I learned all line up almost seamlessly with the content in the book. Names are changed. Coach Morgan Randall, his first name is Randy. The last name became Randall. His dog, who is a Black Lab Newfoundland mix, this enormous, beautiful dog with just shiny jet black coat. His name is Morgan.
Ah, nice.
And so it's just sort of it's the perfect name to combine those two. And that's really kind of how things were built in the kind of the pre-book outlines and writing, and the stories almost match up perfectly. Some locations and things were changed, but he's every bit as eccentric and funny in real life he was as he is in the book.
So you get to really, one of the things I like about the book is you build the character up of Morgan Randall. And you really get to love this. He's kind of over the top, isn't he? I mean, he's larger than life. He has decades of experience, and you learn to love him by the end of the book. And I did a little research after I read the book, and I actually looked into Coach Mills and a little bit about his history and the things he did. And everything I read, the word that they used for him to describe him was he was a lacrosse icon. The word living legend was everywhere that I read in stories about him. And the other thing I kept reading was how he impacted so many people's lives. Yeah. And that was consistent with everything I researched on my own, just what I could find on Google. So what was it like being around a leader, a mentor like this? Because at the time you were very young and you're with a guy that's been doing it for 40 years. What was that experience like, being around someone that was so well known and had such a reputation?
Well, number one, it was refreshing because I was 24 years old. I had just come off of a really bad experience as a college athlete playing for a coach who it was just kind of an abusive experience, really. You no other way to put it. So this was refreshing, and you got to see you have an experience where a coach really genuinely cared about his players and treated them like his own sons. He was father to 45 sons every year. His wife was the mother to 45 children every year, and he treated me, like family, like I was one of his own. It didn't start off that way because he's old school. Mm-hmm. And you had to earn his trust. It was all gained, not given. You had to earn it. And he had some eccentric ways, which I'm sure we're going to dive into. But, I knew what I was getting into, and that I was going to work for somebody that had probably forgotten more lacrosse than everyone else, myself included, had ever learned. And that was exciting. And it was, easily the most rewarding experience of my life.
Yeah, I get the feeling that all of your preconceived ideas at what a college coach should be were thrown upside down in the short amount of time with Coach Mills. What I gather, when he handed you a blank playbook essentially, and said, and you were asking like, how do I, what plays do I need to learn? How do I learn the plays? And he would switch it. He would tell you a story and switch it around. And so I think, is it true that you're thinking about what coaching is or could be changed through your relationship with Coach Mills?
100%. I'd asked originally before the season started, hey, can I study a playbook?
Yeah.
And he's like, you really want to study a playbook? I'm like, yeah, I kind of want to get acquainted with, the team. If there's game film, he didn't watch game film. And he said, oh, if you're hell bent on studying a playbook, here you go. And he pulled like what almost looked like an old leather bound kind of photograph album, like back when pictures were actually sent away and got printed out, and you put them under like the cellophane shield on the page. Anyway, like this old 3-ring bound leather, dusty, ancient, distressed thing. He said, here you go. Have at it. Won't take you long. And it's like an encyclopedia thick, Like, what do you mean? What's the old man? Is he the old man crazy? What's he mean? It won't take long. I open it up and it's like 200 blank pages. I'm like, is this a joke? Like, what? He said, that's your first lesson.
Yeah.
And I said, what's that? He's like, plays don't win games. I don't have a playbook. Players win games. So I just said, like, well, what do you do? Like, the score's tied, the end of the game, you call timeout. Like, what do you do? He said, and he laughed. He was like, you give the ball to your best player and tell everyone else to get the hell out of his way.
Yeah.
And I thought he was joking until we were in a game against one of our arch rivals. The score was tied. There's like a minute left. And he called timeout. And he gave the ball to our best player and told everyone else to literally get the hell out of his way. Let's hurry up and win this game. I want to get out of here and go to dinner. And the kid scores a game-winning goal. We get the hell out of there and we go to dinner. And like, he's just laughing, when I looked at him, I'm like, what? Like, really? And he said, I told you.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of like, it was a very unorthodox approach to everything. And I learned, you win with people.
Yeah.
X's, not the X's and O's, this is Jimmy's and Joe's. It's the same thing in the workplace as a leader, as CEO, that, you want to hire people who complement your skill set and have different talents, and you turn them loose and you trust them to do the right thing, and they will.
And that's what I gathered through his stories, is that he put his team, like you said, they were his almost like family. They were his, 45 sons every season, right? They were like family to him, and he treated him. He knew each one, their strengths, their weaknesses, and he knew who the what did you call it in the book? The ones that were the ones that were, the players. There were players and the pretenders, right? Yep. And so and so he knew who the players were, he knew who the pretenders were, and he would call them out. But he knew his people, right? And I think part of leadership coaching is to know your players and know their strengths and know their weaknesses and be able to play to their strengths. And he knew that, and he was telling you that, hey, we're going to get the ball to our best player, and that's how we're going to win the game. We're going to keep things simple, right?
And I think sometimes, and I know this was the case with me with Coach, is sometimes you don't realize you're being taught a lesson, a valuable lesson, until well after the fact. And that was never more abundantly clear to me than 2 years after I worked for him. I became a head coach through a job that he recommended me for and helped me get. And, well, let me backtrack. So you know that. I kind of set the table for you with that. The day that I applied and he invited me to come in for an interview, when I got in there for the interview, I was expecting like to go to his office in the athletic department. He didn't have an office. He had a cubicle in the admissions office, kind of in the administrative building. It was, like piled practically up to his head in papers and just junk and clutter. And he had a ton of plaques on the wall of his cubicle. And anyway, it was just a bizarre environment. I'm like, where am I going to sit for this interview? This is weird. I said, do you want me to pull up a chair, coach? He's like, oh, no. He said, you ever line a field? I'm like, no. He said, well, you're going to learn today. And so I'm like suddenly feeling very overdressed in coat and tie. And we go outside to the game field and get the paint and the paint machine and all that stuff. And he's just talking to me, asking me a couple of questions as, we're lining the field. And at the end of it, I must have done okay, because the end of it, he just said, he said, the job's yours if you want it. The hours suck. The pay's practically nothing. But you get to work with me, and that experience is priceless. And I said, love it. I'll take it. I was just kind of really drawn in by him. So fast forward 2 years later, I had been calling him for advice from my office as a first-time head coach. And I said, I'm about to hire an assistant for the first time, bringing people on campus for an interview. What kind of questions should I ask him? He's like, questions, interview? It's just have him line a field with you. You'll learn everything you need to know about the guy.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait a minute. That whole thing where oh yeah, don't pull up a chair. We're going to go line a field. It just seemed like I thought maybe he was really busy and he didn't have time for me. No, that was the actual interview.
That was the interview.
He never told me that.
Yeah.
It felt like I was on an episode of Punk'd 2 years later. They revealed it, but so that became my interview protocol. I'd literally have the person show up and just get to work with me,
And you learn so much about them as you observe them. In his case, he was, helping him line a field, and he was just watching how you reacted to things that he would do. And,
he's kind of sandbagging, looking back. He'd line up the string. You go from one corner to the other. He'd line it up crooked just to see if I would adjust it, or if I just blindly do whatever with no attention to detail. Yeah. And the whole thing was a test. And I just think, how often are we not aware of our surroundings enough to realize everything's potentially a test. Right. And, your audition for your next job is how well you perform today in your current role.
Right. Yep. That's exactly right. Well, that's good. And I think, if you, when you read the book, it's in that story is in the book, what's funny about it is that every HR manager would throw up to hear that's how the interview process went. But that's really what you want to do. People, you ever heard the expression, well, he looked good on paper, right? Yep. And we do that. We interview people based on what they say that they're good at. But how much do we actually observe them in action? And I think Coach Mills had a way to observe you in action and make some evaluations on you. And one of the things I like. You
don't want to know what I think HR stands for.
Well, we might have HR people listening, so.
The human resistance department, hardly relevant department.
I'm sure we'll get some feedback on that.
Or you can edit that out. Just bleep me.
No, we can't do that. We gotta go. We gotta go live with this. So,
but I think that is the approach that I bring to my role. As a coach and as a consultant. The game's not played on paper in sports.
Right. That's exactly right.
And the game's not played on paper in business, the sport of business.
Yep, that's exactly right. So you've got to get out there and you actually got to perform. It's not just on paper. Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Deep Leadership. We'll be right back after a brief intermission.
Hey, leaders. If you're anything like me, you drink coffee to power through your morning. But what about in the afternoon? For me, I start getting a little sleepy and unfocused around 2 p.m. So I like to do something to get me recharged and refocused. I've tried a bunch of different energy drinks. I've even tried that stuff that's supposed to last 5 hours. Most are expensive and cause you to crash later in the afternoon. I was introduced to a really good product by a fellow veteran. He told me to try Strikeforce Energy. Strikeforce is a veteran-owned company founded by a Navy SEAL, and their products are all made in the USA. Strike Force Energy is a liquid flavor pack that you can add to any beverage. It has 0 calories, 0 carbs, and 0 sugar. Each pack contains 80 milligrams of caffeine. I actually add 2 packs and a liter of water in the afternoon. I get my water, my energy, and the great taste of Strike Force throughout the afternoon. I personally prefer the original flavor. Strike Force Energy is offering a discount to all the listeners of Deep Leadership. Go to strikeforceenergy.com and enter the discount code I have the watch, one word, I have the watch, for a 20% discount on your order. Strike Force Energy, fuel for your fight.
There's a lot of lessons in this book. I mean, it's just, and I really encourage all my readers to get this book and read it, because I think there's so many lessons. But how much of these are, or what are some of the lessons that you took away from working with Coach Mills? What are some that are in the book that people need to read? Leaders especially need to grasp. Mostly the people side of things, and how he. His approach towards people, I think, is one of the areas I took away from a lot.
The example I love to give, and this is sort of my life's philosophy, thanks to him, is your best ideas will always come from outside your industry.
Okay.
I firmly believe that 100% of the time, your best ideas will always come from outside your industry. And the example that I'll share that's kind of topical and relevant today is how Herb Kelleher founded Southwest Airlines. They're a regional commuter jet line. They didn't have a lot of planes. They weren't in a major hub or major markets. They were in smaller markets. They didn't have a big budget to compete with Delta, United Airlines, American. So, they were feeling the stress of that. They wanted to grow. He couldn't grow. And he was burning the candle at both ends, working hard. And a couple of his buddies, completely outside of the industry, just said, "Hey, man, you need to get away. Why don't you come up to this NASCAR race with us?" And he just kind of laughed. He's like, "NASCAR? Why would I want to do that? You're literally just going to watch with a bunch of rednecks, these cars turn left all day." And they're like, "There's more to it than that. Why don't you just come with us?" It became like a guy's weekend. He's like, "All right, fine." And while he wasn't into the race, he was fascinated by the pit crew and how fast they were able to change tires, get the driver some water, clean the windshield, fuel it up, and in a matter of seconds, get it right back out on the track. And that's when the light bulb went on for him. He's like, that's how we're going to compete in the airline industry. And, the standard turnaround from the time you landed a plane, got everyone off, cleaned it up, fueled it up, did whatever maintenance you had to do, and got the new passengers on board and took off for the next destination in your routing, was an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 20 minutes. And he decided to apply that pit crew philosophy. And, it turned into, they call it the 20-minute turnaround. And if you've ever flown Southwest, you'll see when you're getting off the plane, even the pilots pitch in and pick up garbage in the aisle. And, it's a team concept. And it was an idea born of him watching a NASCAR race. So that's just an example I think everyone can kind of latch on to. An example I learned personally from Coach Mills was simply be a lifelong learner and surround yourself with people in different industries that you can learn from, and you can kind of take a page out of their playbook. And he had sort of a personal board of directors. He called them the 3 wise men. And these are people who were in the local community. I don't know if he met them through the Rotary or, another civic group or the Chamber of Commerce, but it was a preacher. It was a Marine Corps recruiter and CEO of a multimedia company. And 3 very different leaders, 3 very different walks of life. And throw him into the mix, and it's 4 completely different industries. And it's very different personalities. But, they would sit down at the local diner for breakfast and use each other as a sounding board and, kind of trusted advisors. And he sent me to meet with each of them. And that was life-changing. It added a level of respect that I had for him, because he just seemed kind of eccentric. And, when you've been doing what he'd been doing for so many years, like, you can literally pull stuff out of your back pocket. You've got all this, wealth of information, institutional knowledge, but it seemed very haphazard to me because I didn't realize, like, the value of having so much experience because I had none. I thought you had to have like a written plan, on paper, and that wasn't him. It was all in his hard drive between his ears from just many, many years of experience. So that finally became crystallized for me when I met with each of those guys, and they talked about, how much they revered him. This is, if you think about, like, I know you're a Navy guy, but, like, bear with me, the Marines, they're not quite the Navy, I realize, John, right? But they're one of the branches of the military.
They're a department of the Navy.
Yeah.
So the men's department. That's what they like to say.
Okay. So, like, one of the highest honors, a Marine can have is to become a recruiter, and to recruit future leaders that, the national security is entrusted to. So, like, that's one of the most highly revered people in our community. And he looked up to Coach, multi-millionaire CEO of radio and television and print media group, held Coach in his highest regard, in his circle of trusted advisors. I mean, that's when I really got it. Like, okay, you need to surround yourself with people who, view the world, your business through a very different lens. Well, and there's huge benefit to that.
Well, and what I liked about the story is, again, he's your mentor, you're the mentee, but he exposes you to his three wise men, his three advisors. And, basically, I don't know if it was a fall break or something, but he said, all right, I've already got it lined up for you. You're going to meet these three guys. And in each case, you pulled away a wealth of information from those guys that, influenced you as a coach later on. So what I liked about that is, as a mentor, he exposed you to, the people he trusted the most and wanted you to gain knowledge from them as well.
And a lot of leaders think they have to have all the answers. You're the guy at the front of the room leading the meeting, whatever meeting it might be. You don't have to have all the answers. You need to surround yourself with people whose talents and knowledge base complement you.
Right, exactly.
And I didn't realize that until he showed me that. Yeah.
That's really powerful. So why is mentoring so important when it comes to either whether it's coaching or leadership? What do we do? What does mentoring actually bring to the table that maybe you don't get through, going to college or studying or even internships? What is the mentoring? Why is that so important in leadership and coaching? What does that bring to the table, and what does it look like when mentoring is done right?
Well, I think there are two ways you can do anything. Two types of experiences you can have. You can have expensive experience, or you can have inexpensive experience. Expensive experiences, thinking you can just go it alone, figure it out as you go, and that can literally, in business, be financially expensive. It can also be, emotionally expensive too. Never mind, the expense of your time. Or you could have, what Coach exposed me to with those three mentors. You could have inexpensive experiences, which are being able to tap into the minds of people who are further down the path you're traveling, and they can share with you, a lot of the speed bumps, pitfalls, things to avoid, and then also give you some guidance on what to do before you're ever in those situations. So, one can be extremely painful if you try and go it alone, and the other can really accelerate your learning curve, your growth. And I think that is the most powerful example of why we all need mentors. Even someone with 43 years of college head coaching experience, hundreds upon hundreds of wins and championships and awards, he still had at least three mentors. that he turned to weekly, if not daily.
Well, you talk about this a lot too. You say, in a way, a leader is like an elite athlete, right? And elite athletes have coaches to help coach them up on whether it's strength training or agility or whatever specialty they need to get better at. And I like the fact that you say that even the most experienced leader needs a coach to help them, to be that sounding board, to help them with, guidance, to think differently when they're stuck on one particular idea. And I think I think what you're saying is that experience with Coach Mills is that he had that group that he could talk to. He had that. He was elite, but yet he had the coaches to help him along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at anyone who's elite in anything, I love, the lens I view the world through is typically sports, that and country music, which is another whole podcast. But so if you look at like an elite performer in sports, and I think, let's take basketball. I think Michael Jordan is absolutely the gold standard in all of basketball. He didn't have a coach. He had his coach who coached the Chicago Bulls, Phil Jackson, but he also had a private shooting coach. He also had a nutritionist. He had a strength and conditioning coach. He had a sports psychologist. He had a massage therapist. His nutritionist wasn't also his acupuncturist. His nutritionist wasn't also his strength coach. Like he had a variety of coaches. And I think that's a great metaphor or a great, parallel with the business world. We all need multiple coaches because we are all corporate athletes, just like, we aspire to be the Michael Jordan of our industry. And, to have those multiple different lenses through which we can view our role, because we can't see it all. You can't see the picture when you're trapped inside the frame. And so often we get tunnel vision because, we're in the thick of things ourselves. And, that's why we need multiple different lenses, to be able to use as a sounding board and to help us get somewhere we can't get ourselves, which is really what a coach does. They help you become something that you didn't think you could. And they have conversations with you that you don't necessarily want to have, but you need to hear. And the best coach in my life as an athlete was my high school coach, John Dissler. And he was the one person in my life during my formative years when I could have gone down a really bad path, who was willing to have a difficult conversation with me. Just a short 5-minute conversation completely changed the trajectory of my life in high school. And I don't think I'd be who I am or where I am today without him. He constantly tells me, because we're still in touch, constantly tells me I give him way too much credit. I said, I don't think so. I think you give yourself not anywhere near enough credit for what you've done. And, but I think that is a coach. They see something in you you don't see in yourself, and they pour into you. They invest in you.
I like in the book you tell the story of looking in the dictionary at coach versus the definition of a coach versus the definition of a teacher. And I actually, after I read the book, I looked them up myself because I'm that way. I got to see it myself, right? And they're the same definition. And I never knew that until I read your book.
The definition is to provide instruction.
Provide instruction. Yeah. And I think it's really powerful. So this is really great, John. I appreciate that. And I really do encourage everyone that's listening to get this book because I think you really need to see, going back to the ripple effect, just the effects that one person, one leader, one coach, one mentor can have on so many people. And after reading the book, I just had so much respect for Coach Mills and your experience and Coach Morgan Randall, who is the character in the book. And you fall in love with him by the end of the story. He was, he's an old curmudgeon. He was very unique, and but you fall in love with him because he just cared so much for people.
I don't think that book really did him justice, So what I've been striving to do is, to kind of expose the world to Coach Morgan Randall, if you will, in a variety of ways. There's the book Seeds of Success, but we also had it adapted to a screenplay for a Hollywood major motion picture. That'll have to be independently produced because unless it's a superhero movie or a sequel like Rocky 15 or a remake of something old, Hollywood is not investing in it right now. So that's something we're trying to do, but also in the meanwhile, kind of building a brand around Coach Morgan Randall. That's sort of become a pen name for me. And Coach Randall has written a couple books himself.
Yes.
And, I think that's what we do to pay homage to someone and to help, remember their legacy, is just bring them to life in different ways. And, that's what I've tried to do with him, just to expose more people to the message than you would simply get through one book. With that in mind, at the Coach Randall on Twitter is a source of constant amusement for many, many people. Yes. I encourage you to follow him. Yes. John Rennie's one of his biggest fans.
Yes, he's one. In fact, I met Coach Morgan Randall before I met Coach Brew. So
the irony of it all.
The irony of it all. So John, what are you working on now? What's the big news that's coming out?
Eventually, I'll be allowed out of my house because at the time of this recording, we are. What's the technical term you use for this?
What is it? Stay at home. What is it? Self-quarantine? Is it? I don't know what it's called.
Something in place. What I forget the.
Oh yeah.
Social distancing, self-quarantine. Staying in place. I don't know what they're saying. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what we're all doing right now. And while I'm doing that, I'm working on, the finishing touches of my new book, Beyond Stadium Status, which is the sequel to my book, Stadium Status. Find out more about that at beyondstadiumstatus.com. And really, the stadium is the lens through which I view the world. And I think more people, not because I say so, but because it's such a great example, more people ought to view the world through that lens. If you think about like coaches, elite athletes, stadium status, entertainers, they're all performers and they hold themselves to very high standards. They impact as leaders in their own right, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And they do it their way. They blaze their own trail. They're really kind of the ultimate entrepreneurs. I think there's so much, learning your best ideas from outside your industry. There's so much that business leaders can learn from stadium status performers. So I took a dive into that in my book, Stadium Status. And just based on reader feedback and demand, people have been begging me for kind of more stadium status content. So we're bringing Beyond Stadium Status out very soon. And that's what I'm working on.
And I, for one, am very excited. That's one of my favorite books as well. Stadium Status is
well, you're endorsing this bad boy. So
I'm looking forward to the sequel. So so I'm actually looking forward to it. I can tell you, to my listeners, Stadium Status, one of John's other books, is I live by the principles every day. I learn techniques in that book that I practice every day as a CEO of my company. So Stadium Status is an amazing book. Beyond Stadium Status will be even more amazing, right? The sequel is always better.
Well, it better be, right? Right. I mean, Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Squeakquel was better than the original movie, right?
Absolutely.
So, many people say the New Testament's better than the Old Testament. Certainly easier to read.
Yes.
So, that's kind of my goal with this.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to that. And so how can people connect with you, get Seeds of Success, find out about your new book? Where can they go?
You can go to coachbrew.com. That is the gateway to my community, and all my social media is on there if you want to follow. I think the best thing you can do is go to coachbrew.com, coachbru.com, or misspell it, coachbrew. Either one will get you there, and sign up for my e-news. You will get sometimes it's weekly, sometimes it's more than once a week, a leadership performance tip article from me, maybe a podcast episode like what we're doing here. I distinctly recall doing a podcast episode, John Rennie.
Yes.
So you can go there. And then when you're there, what will automatically happen is you will receive a complimentary issue of my premium print newsletter, which is my membership site. It's Yesterday's Underdogs, which John Rennie is a member of.
Yes.
And that complimentary newsletter issue is 12 pages, and it is 12 ways to double your sales and double your results. So that is my gift to you if you go to coachbrew.com and sign up at the top of the page up there.
I encourage everyone who's listening to that to go to coachbrew.com. And if you want to take your business to the next level, you want to take your leadership skills to the next level, Coach Brew is good, and he's been in the trenches. He knows what he's talking about, and he looks at business as he looks for the things that other people aren't seeing. I think he sees things that others don't, and he tells you that in his books. And he's helped me become a better leader and a better CEO because of it. So really highly encourage all of you to go out there and take a look at that, and follow him on Twitter. There's always interesting things, especially on Fridays. We say he's going to mess he's going to mess with anything I put out on a Friday. You'll see that if you follow me on Twitter. So, John, thank you very much for being on the show, and I appreciate all of your insight. And I really appreciate you writing this book, because I think it's one of the best books I've read on mentor and mentee relationships. So thanks for writing that book and bringing it to the world, because I think we all have a better feel for Coach Mills and now Coach Morgan Randall as well. So,
well, thanks for having me on the podcast, John. I appreciate the kind words, and I learn every bit as much from you as well, my friend.
Well, that's it for today. If you haven't done it already, pick up a copy of my latest book, I Have the Watch, Becoming a Leader Worth Following. It's filled with 23 short stories to help you become a more effective leader. It's super easy to read, and most people finish it in less than 2 hours. To thank the listeners of this podcast, there's a special discount code for signed copies of the book. Go to ihavethewatch.com and click the link for signed copies and enter the discount code DEEPLEADERSHIP at checkout to get 20% off your order, and domestic shipping is always free. I hope you have a great week, and if you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.